My name is Emma, and I'm a registered nurse in Boston. That night, I was still in my scrubs, the fabric damp with sweat, after a 12-hour shift in the trauma unit. My body ached from leaning over patients who had shouted, bled, begged, and sometimes cursed at me for trying to save them. I wanted nothing more than a shower and a few hours of silence. Instead, I picked up a call from my mother, her voice loud on speaker, as I sat in the dim light of my apartment. "Flights are $1,250 each," she said, as if she were discussing the weather. "If you can't afford it, just stay behind." Her words dropped like a stone in my chest. She didn't hesitate, didn't soften, didn't ask if I wanted to come. She simply drew the line. If I couldn't pay, I didn't belong. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted iron, because this wasn't the first time she had placed me on the outside. It was simply the latest reminder that my place in this family existed only if I kept footing the bill. I forced myself to respond with a short, quiet, "Okay, though." My pulse was racing. I smiled at the empty room like I hadn't just been told I was disposable. Then my phone vibrated on the counter. A notification from my credit card app blinked on the screen. 4 business class tickets had been purchased within the last hour. My card, my account, my money. I froze, staring at the names scrolling in front of me. Margaret Bell, Henry Bell, Sophia Miller, Jason Miller, mother, father, sister, brother-in-law, no Emma. My hands trembled as I held the phone, the sound of traffic drifting through the thin apartment walls. I felt my breath catch somewhere between anger and disbelief. They hadn't even asked. They had simply assumed the same way they always did. That was the moment the edges of my patience finally cracked. And even as my heart hammered, a strange calm spread through me. I knew I was done, being the family's wallet. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone still glowing in my palm, and my first instinct was denial. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe I was misreading the charge. But when I opened the receipt, there was no mistake. 4 tickets, all business class, all on my card. Not even a window seat reserved in my name. I locked the account before I could second-guess myself, my finger pressing the button with more force than necessary. For the first time in years, I didn't apologize to the empty air afterward. My chest felt tight, but not in the usual way. This wasn't guilt. This was relief. An hour later, while brushing my teeth, another buzz rattled across the bathroom counter. A text from Sophia lit up the screen. "Why isn't anything paid for? We're at check-in." I stared at the message, foam still on my lips, and something inside me snapped into place. They were standing at the airport, shocked that the invisible safety net had vanished. I wiped my mouth, typed back 2 words, "What you said," and set the phone down. For once, I refused to explain myself. That silence tasted better than any apology I'd ever given. But it didn't start there. It had been years in the making, a slow erosion of boundaries that I had convinced myself was love. I remembered being 23, barely out of nursing school, when Sophia asked to borrow my credit card to buy a dress for her engagement party. "It's temporary, I'll pay you back in a month," she promised. She never did. I remembered my father, Henry, asking me to co-sign a small loan so they could redo their kitchen. "It's for the resale value," he'd said, convincing me that one day I'd benefit when the house was passed down. That house had been refinanced twice, and none of the money went to me. I remembered covering Mom's emergency room deductible when she collapsed from high blood pressure. I didn't think twice. Of course I'd help. But months later, when I caught pneumonia from back-to-back shifts and asked if she could bring me soup, she told me she had promised to babysit Sophia's kids while my sister got her nails done. One memory after another piled up like unpaid invoices in my mind. At the time, I convinced myself it was normal. Family helps family. But it was never mutual. I was the dependable one, the nurse with a steady job, the single daughter without kids, the one who could always pitch in. As I rinsed my mouth and put the toothbrush away, my phone buzzed again. Another text this time, sharper. "Emma, this is serious. We can't board until you fix it." I could almost see Sophia's face, red with frustration, at the counter, Jason beside her, shifting uncomfortably, my mother tapping her nails on the desk, as if the world owed her a smoother ride. I didn't reply. I didn't even open the message thread. I let it sit there unanswered, while I pulled on an old hoodie and crawled into bed. For the first time in years, I fell asleep without setting an alarm. The next morning, I woke to a string of missed calls. 10 from Sophia, 4 from Mom, 2 from Dad. Each voicemail, more frantic than the last, demanding to know what had happened, why I had sabotaged them. Their words barely registered anymore. I simply sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee from a chipped mug, letting their outrage roll past me, like static on the radio. It should have hurt more. It should have made me doubt myself. But instead, I felt the first fragile threads of freedom tugging loose. I didn't tell them that I had already decided to book a trip for myself, somewhere warm, somewhere quiet, somewhere without obligations. It wouldn't be first class, it wouldn't even be Hawaii, but it would be mine. As I scrolled through flights to Florida, my phone buzzed yet again. This time it wasn't Sophia or Mom. It was Dad, his voice breaking through the voicemail like gravel. Emma, pick up. We need to talk. You can't just do this to your family. His words didn't sting like they used to. Instead, I noticed something else: his panic. For once, they weren't in control. For once, I had drawn the line, and they were the ones stranded on the wrong side of it. And I knew this was only the beginning. The calls didn't stop. By noon, my phone was vibrating across the kitchen counter every 10 minutes. When I muted it, the pounding started on my apartment door. I froze coffee mug halfway to my lips, heart pounding against my ribs. Through the peephole, I saw Sophia's sharp profile, and my mother's arms crossed like she was standing in judgment at a church altar. Jason leaned against the wall, scrolling on his phone, as if this was just another inconvenience. Emma, open up, Mom called, her voice carrying down the hallway. We need to settle this. You embarrassed us in front of everyone. People were staring, her words twisted like a knife. Not, we're sorry. Not, we shouldn't have used your card. Just shame that they had been exposed. I backed away from the door, pressing my back against the wall, and whispered to myself, don't cave, not this time. The knocking grew louder, fists against wood like drums of accusation. Stop acting like a child, Sophia shouted. You're ruining this whole trip. You've always been dramatic, but this is too far. I swallowed hard. My palms were slick with sweat, but something inside me stiffened. Every insult was familiar, rehearsed a script they had used for years to keep me compliant. But the words weren't landing anymore. I stood in the silence that followed, listening as their footsteps eventually retreated down the hallway. For the first time in years, I had refused to answer the door, and the world hadn't collapsed. The air in my apartment felt clearer, lighter, as if I had finally cracked open a window that had been sealed shut. That evening, I sat cross-legged on the couch with my laptop balanced on my knees. Instead of scrolling through social media or replaying their voicemails, I pulled up a travel site. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitant, then began typing Orlando, Miami, Tampa. Places where I wouldn't have to serve anyone else's needs. The prices weren't extravagant. A small hotel by the beach, a budget airline ticket, nothing that screamed luxury. But when I clicked book, a warmth spread through me that no first-class champagne glass could match. It was mine. All mine. When the confirmation email landed in my inbox, I leaned back and let out a shaky laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was the first choice I had made in years that was just for me. The next morning, I stepped into the hospital cafeteria for coffee before another shift. I could feel the exhaustion in my bones, but there was a small ember inside me now. My phone buzzed again, and this time with a new voicemail from Dad. His tone was low-weighted. You can't keep doing this, Emma. You're tearing the family apart. We can't believe you'd betray us like this. Betrayal. The word echoed as I stirred sugar into my cup. They had stolen from me, manipulated me, dismissed me, and yet somehow I was the traitor. My hands shook as I carried the cup back to a table, but it wasn't fear this time. It was fury. That night they came back. I heard their voices outside the door, Mom's high-pitched pleading, Dad's gravelly commands. Jason's footsteps thudded like he owned the hallway. They called my name, knocked, even tried the handle. I sat perfectly still on the couch, lights off, phone in my lap. My pulse raced, but my resolve was sharper than ever. Eventually, their voices faded into the night, leaving only the sound of my breath and the hum of the refrigerator. My apartment had never felt so small, but also never so safe. For the first time, I realized I wasn't powerless. Refusing to open that door was more than silence. It was a choice. And choices, I thought, had consequences. The apartment was quiet the next morning, but my phone screen looked like a storm. Dozens of missed calls, a flood of texts, each one angrier than the last. Words like selfish, ungrateful, and dramatic filled the screen until the letters blurred. I set the phone face down on the table and inhaled deeply. For once, I didn't feel the need to defend myself, but I knew silence alone wouldn't be enough. I opened my laptop, the glow casting pale light across my living room. My fingers hovered over the keys, and then I began to type. At first, it was just numbers, small debts I had brushed off, favors as I had absorbed without complaint. But as the list grew, each entry felt like a wound reopening. $600 for Sophia's engagement dress. $2,500 when Jason lost his job and the rent came due. $800 for Dad's MRI deductible. $400 for Mom's groceries when she forgot her wallet. And now, $4,800 for 4 tickets to Hawaii purchased on my credit card without my consent. The total glared back at me like a verdict. $7,700. My chest tightened, but not with guilt, with clarity. I drafted the email, each word deliberate. Per your belief that families should be there for each other. Please find attached an itemized record of my financial support over the past 24 months. As of August 1st, I will no longer subsidize family expenses. Full repayment is expected within 30 business days. After that, I will submit formal reports to my credit provider for unauthorized use. No further financial interaction will be permitted moving forward. I read it twice, steadying my hands, then clicked send to the family group chat. The reaction was immediate. Are you serious? Sophia fired back first. Who sends an invoice to their own family? Mom followed. This is hurtful, Emma. Completely unnecessary. You're making things worse. And then Dad. We raised you better than this. I stared at the line, heat rising in my chest. They hadn't raised me. They had drained me. I typed back slowly, each keystroke a release. You never saw me as family. You saw me as funding. Silence followed. For a moment, I thought they might finally understand that the message had pierced through years of manipulation. But the truth was, they didn't want to understand. They wanted compliance. Another buzz lit up the screen. Sophia again, grow up. You can't punish the whole family over one misunderstanding. My laugh cracked out in the quiet room, sharp and humorless. I had been patient, forgiving, even complicit. But this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was theft. I closed the laptop and leaned back on the couch, staring at the ceiling. My heart was racing, adrenaline flooding my veins, but underneath it was a strange calm. For the first time, I had put the numbers on paper, made them undeniable. And yet, I knew this wouldn't end with one invoice. People like my family didn't let go of their crutches without a fight. They would twist, argue, manipulate, and plead. They would come back again and again until I was forced to slam the door harder. But I was ready now. When the next voicemail came, Dad's gravel voice insisting, "You were supposed to help, you always do," I didn't flinch. I saved the message not as a reminder of guilt, but as evidence. Because I was no longer the family's safety net. I was preparing for war. 2 days passed in a blur of unanswered calls and buzzing notifications. I thought maybe the storm had quieted, that the silence meant they had given up. But silence in my family was never peace, it was calculation. The message came late at night, just as I was about to crawl into bed. A ping from Facebook Messenger of all places, a name I hadn't seen in years. Laura, Jason's ex-wife. I hesitated before opening it. The last time I had spoken to Laura was at Sophia's wedding, when she pulled me aside and whispered, "You deserve better than the way they treat you." She had vanished from our lives soon after, moving across the country after her divorce. Her message was short. "Hey Emma, sorry to pop in like this, but you might want to talk." Beneath it was a PDF file. My finger hovered over the screen, heart pounding, as if I were about to detonate a bomb. I clicked. Pages of screenshots unfolded before me, bank transfers, emails, account statements. My stomach dropped. Jason had been rerouting funds from a joint family account into his own ventures. Not just small amounts, thousands. Some transactions were tagged with crypto investment, others were direct transfers to gambling sites. I scrolled faster, bile rising in my throat. It wasn't just Jason's recklessness. There were emails too. One from my mother. Please don't tell Emma. She doesn't need to know. Another from my father. We'll fix this. She'll help if we ask, but we can't risk her cutting us off. I slapped the laptop shut, the sound echoing through my apartment. My pulse roared in my ears. They had known. My parents had known for months, maybe years, that Jason was bleeding the family dry, and instead of confronting him, they had chosen to hide it from me. Worse, they had chosen to use me as the backup plan. I called Laura immediately. She picked up on the second ring, her voice calm but cautious. I wasn't sure you'd want to talk, she admitted. But I couldn't keep watching from the sidelines. Why now? My throat was dry, my voice tight. Because you finally did what I should have done years ago, she said. You walked away. And I thought you deserved to know the truth. I pressed a hand to my forehead, pacing the length of my living room. They knew. My mom and dad knew. I'm sorry, Emma, Laura said softly. They've been covering for Jason. They didn't want you to cut them off, so they kept feeding you half-truths. I've been keeping receipts for a long time. I thought maybe you'd need them one day. I thanked her, my voice trembling, and promised I'd keep the files safe. When I hung up, I sat in the dark, the glow of the laptop screen still burning in my mind. The betrayal felt like a second skin pressing down on every inch of me. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust, about realizing that the people who were supposed to protect me had been complicit in my exploitation. I printed every page of the PDF, the hum of the printer loud in the stillness of my apartment. One by one, I laid the sheets on the table, staring at the proof until it blurred. Numbers, names, signatures, all undeniable. My parents had chosen silence. They had chosen Jason. And in doing so, they had chosen to sacrifice me. I slid the papers into a folder and tucked it into my desk drawer. My hands shook, but my mind was steady. For the first time, I wasn't gaslighting myself. I wasn't making excuses for them. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was betrayal. And when they came knocking again, and I knew they would, I would be ready. The knock came on a Saturday afternoon, steady and insistent. I had half expected it. Through the peephole, I saw them, my mother clutching a folder of papers, my father standing stiff beside her, his jaw tight. For a moment, I thought about pretending I wasn't home, but tonight I was done hiding. I opened the door just enough to face them. Mom's voice trembled as she said, Emma, we need to talk. Invoice the accusations, it's gone too far. My father stepped forward, his eyes hard. This stunt freezing the card, sending that list, it's spiteful. We are your family. I let their words hang in the air, then answered calmly. No, family doesn't drain each other. Family doesn't use my name and my money without asking. Mom's eyes glistened. We didn't think it would be an issue. You always help. Because you trained me to... I cut in. Since I was 23, you've treated me like a walking debit card. Every time I said yes, it was because I thought saying no made me a bad daughter. But I'm done being the good daughter. My father's voice rose. You think this makes you strong? Turning your back on us. I held his gaze. No, but it makes me free. Then I closed the door. Not slammed, just firm final. The echo reverberated through the apartment, louder than any argument we'd ever had. On the other side, their voices blurred, then faded. For the first time, the silence that followed didn't scare me. It steadied me. And I knew the next chapter of my life would begin without them. In the days that followed, I expected the guilt to crush me. For so long, guilt had been my leash. But instead, what settled in was quiet. The phone still buzzed sometimes, but I no longer flinched when I saw their names. I saved the voicemails out of habit, not out of fear. Evidence, not shackles. I started therapy. At first, sitting across from a stranger felt impossible. How could anyone understand years of being the family's lifeline? But week by week, the weight on my chest began to ease. I walked out of those sessions taller, breathing deeper, as if someone had unlocked a window in my ribcage. Life began to bloom in small ways. I bought a bike and rode along the Charles River on weekends. I tried recipes I'd once dismissed as too indulgent. I really laughed with Ben, a quiet resident I'd met in the hospital cafeteria, who listened to me without judgment. For the first time, love didn't feel like a transaction. When the check arrived from my parents, $7,870, no note attached, I didn't cash it right away. Instead, I pinned it above my desk next to a quote I'd copied down. "You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep others warm." Weeks later, I deposited it and sent every dollar to a scholarship fund for young nurses supporting their families while in school. Someone out there was me 5 years ago thinking this cycle was normal. I wanted her to know it wasn't. I used to think closure meant their apology. But closure, I realized, was mine to create. And as I stood in my apartment, sun spilling across the floor, I whispered the words that had carried me through it all. I am not your safety net. I am my own person. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.